I don't know, what the hell is that?
Yes.
What do we have to do with Gaza? Like, my instinct is always like, we got nothing to do with this.
Yeah,
I'm out.
I'm good.
He goes, the Israel lobbies totally control Congress like nobody else. That's not true anymore. I'm like, did you just say that?
Yeah.
So Tucker Carlson recently slammed the Trump administration for its infatuation with Israel, for allowing Israel to dictate a lot of the U.S. foreign policy regime. And this is in the context of a conversation with Michael Knowles, who podcasts with the Daily Wire. So something tells me that we might not totally agree on this, but I want to see what he has to say. So please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Trump drops these bombs in every conversation you have with him. I haven't interviewed him that many times because it's so difficult.
Dizzying.
Dizzying, because he does the weave famously. But every time I've interviewed him, like 3 days later, I'll think, what, did he just say that right in the middle of the, right?
Yes.
Yesterday, he was doing an interview with the Daily Caller. Right in the middle of the interview, he was talking about Israel, and I love Israel, and no one's done more for Israel than I've done, and rooting for Israel. He's very pro-Israel, of course. And then he goes...
they used to own Congress or whatever.
He said that. He goes, the Israel lobbies totally control Congress like nobody else. That's not true anymore. I'm like, did you just say that?
Yeah.
Well, mass down moment and news break, breaking news, spoiler, they still control Congress and they still boast about it. If you don't believe me, go on AIPAC's site right now and see how many representatives they boast about being beholden to their Israel First agenda. It's 361 members of Congress, by the way. It still owns Congress and it still owns the president, as we know.
It was amazing. I remember in the interview or the press conference with Netanyahu, this was months ago, and I don't think I was taken in by theatricality. I think this was real when he said, and look, what we're going to do is the United States is going to take over Gaza. And you look at Netanyahu and he looks at Trump and he kind of looks nervously at the audience. He's kind of laughing, but kind of not laughing. And he's like, what is it? He goes, we're going to take over Gaza. We're going to build a big Trump casino there or whatever. I don't know what he's going to do. Hey, we're going to build it. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be the Riviera of the Middle East. And it was so apparently out of left field. And I'm not even convinced he's totally sincere on that. I think he's a great negotiator and he's working other angles.
It was weird. I was actually in the Middle East that day when that happened, and I was eating with a bunch of, local residents who run the government in the country I was in. And I'm like, and I was actually sitting at the table and they played that. Everyone's staring at this. And I thought, I don't know, what the hell is that?
Yes.
Yeah, and actually more has come out about this. Breaking Points, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, did a piece about how there was a leaked PowerPoint slide discussing potential for American development in Gaza, the American Riviera. This is preposterous. Talk about the dangers of entangling alliances. Try to expand the empire by rebuilding Gaza in American image. What's more likely to cause more catastrophe in the Middle East than what's happening now? Something like that, trying to take over the Palestinian homeland for the United States and Israel. Not just Israel this time, not just bankrolling Netanyahu's slaughter of people there, his genocide, his starvation crusade, but developing it for America under conquest. It's totally absurd and, beyond the realm of any kind of possibility.
What do we have to do with Gaza? Like, my instinct is always like, we got nothing to do with this.
Yeah,
I'm out.
I'm good.
It's like when girls fight. Like, I don't want to get involved.
I'll take Monaco. I'll take the French Riviera. I don't need the Gaza Riviera.
That's exactly right. But their reaction I have no idea if this is true or not, but it was so interesting. They're sophisticated, very sophisticated. And they're like, oh, no, that's an attack on Netanyahu.
Yes.
That was their gut reaction. He's basically tweaking Netanyahu.
It wasn't a haymaker. It wasn't he wasn't collaborating on that. It was a little poke. And
so you think that too?
Yes, I think it was a little poke.
In what way?
In the sense that it's in the cabinet meeting the other day, Trump was asked, he said, you promised that this war would be over permanently in 5 seconds after you were inaugurated. And so when are we going to get a definitive conclusion to the war? And he laughs. A definitive conclusion. He turns to Steve Witkoff. He says, hey, Steve, how long this conflict, this has been going on? Thousands of years, is it? Yeah, there's no definitive conclusion.
Well, I don't think Trump ever promised to make a conclusion to this conflict in Gaza. He did orchestrate a ceasefire the day before he assumed office, which, by the way, he allowed Netanyahu to break. Netanyahu never had any prospect of an idea of actually following through on this, only for a few days. And the first few rounds of hostage exchanges happened between Hamas and Israel. And by the way, Hamas is still willing to exchange hostages. Israel won't allow it because those remaining hostages are the pretext they need to consummate their genocide in Gaza. Hamas is still willing to negotiate with that. There's something like 50 hostages that Hamas still has versus something like 3,500 that Israel has. But Netanyahu needs that, just like he needs the propaganda that Iran is this close, just days away from acquiring a nuke, such that regime change can still be on the table with Iran. This is how the Israelis work. This is how they operate. This is how the Likud propagandize Americans to support their genocide and war in the Middle East.
We're just trying to stop the bloodshed. We're trying to establish some kind of peace. And it's this brilliant move, because in what other way are you going to get the Israelis and the Arab League and the Iranian regime all united in not liking this one plan? Is by suggesting we're going to go in and take it. And so, you know, it's basically an intractable situation. There will not be any permanent resolution probably until the second coming. So what you want to do is just establish some modicum of political order. What I would especially like to see happen is a preservation of the holy sites and, pilgrimage access and all that. But we
should demand that. I mean, that's not even, it's like, no one owns Jerusalem. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. But there's easier said than done in a messy neck of the woods.
Yeah, but what do you think will establish order more in that region of the world and in Israel, both in Green Line Israel and the occupied territories and the West Bank and Gaza? Is it to allow the Israelis to expand their settlements into Syria and Lebanon and encourage the destabilization of both of those countries in addition to Iran, and also enacting a genocide in Gaza? Will that bring peace and stability and order? No, and the U.S. does have leverage in this regard. It can threaten to restrict funding to Netanyahu and Israel. It won't do that because it is, contrary to Trump's assertions, owned by the Israel lobby. He got $100 million from Miriam Adelson. He filled his cabinets with Adelson's men. Congress is owned by AIPAC in this regard, at least in these voting patterns and these bipartisan calls for aid to Israel, which he isn't threatening to withhold. He could. Instead, Trump turns a blind eye to what's happening in Gaza. A few times he said, there is starvation there, when Netanyahu has contradicted that and said, there's no starvation. But he is complicit. The U.S. is bankrolling this. There's no cleaner way to say it.
When you're paying for it, you can just be like, look, our first demand is Christians need to be able to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So,
of course.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. It seems to me that the holy sites still seem to be okay. In Gaza, there was unfortunately the attack on St. Porphyrius, which I grant was accidental. I don't think it was. I don't see why, from a strategic perspective, it would be beneficial to the Israelis to particularly stick a finger in the eye of the Christians when.
Well, they make the same excuses for bombing churches that they use for bombing hospitals. They say that there was Hamas there. It's the excuse a serial killer could make if one of his 30 victims or so happened to be Hamas. It was just Hamas, and all those other people were human shields. They were collateral damage. That's the excuses they made after the strike on the church, and that wasn't unprecedented. It wasn't the first church they bombed. They also bombed a church saying that there's underground tunnels filled with Hamas that killed a direct relative to former Representative Justin Amash. This is the excuse making they use. It is, human shields that they lay blame on all the time. An excuse that wouldn't fly in the United States. If you had 5 people and 4 were hostages and one was a criminal, a vile criminal, you couldn't just drop a bomb down on the whole establishment. That would not fly.
America is your last political protector.
There's been a lot of it. I don't know. I don't understand it. I think it's self-destructive behavior, but what I care about is the effect on Christians, and it's just not good at all.
Well, and you have to ask yourself too, okay, what's the conclusion? You could either have the state of Israel take over Gaza again. It had Gaza from 67 until 05, then just gave it away in 05.
Didn't give it away. They still subject those people to subjugation. There's still a blockade. They still tightly control the rights and privileges of the people there, hold them hostage under prison-like conditions where they control the power and electricity, don't allow people out, lesser amounts of rights. They can't vote in Israeli elections. They're not totally out, even though that was the story in 2005.
Hamas gets elected. Hamas runs it for a little bit. And then there's the October 7th attack. Israel's going to say now, okay, this is an unacceptable security risk. We're not dealing with this anymore. So you could have Israel take it over. That's going to be probably an unsatisfactory resolution. You could have the Arab League take it over, some of Egypt take it over. I don't know that they really want to do it. No one wants to touch that hot potato. You could have, and then Trump just drops out of the air. And he says, yeah, we're taking it. And we're going to develop condominiums and we're going to ship all of the residents to South Sudan. That was floated, I think, in the Israeli government. South Sudan, the one place on earth that's less pleasant than Gaza. And I don't think that's going to work out well at all. And what is, I think Trump is totally sincere in what he says. He goes, my solution here is not some permanent answer that will totally make the Israelis happy and totally irritate all the Arabs and the Persians. My answer is not going to totally make the Israelis unhappy and totally satisfy Egypt or whatever, the Arab League. I just want some semblance of peace, which is where...
That's not his vantage point. He wants to continue funding Israel while it kills people by the multitudes in Gaza. This is not some 4D chess thing that's beneficial to the peace process. You could float a two-state solution, and that would be more feasible than what he's talking about now, which is building the Riviera there is a way to establish the peace, or floating the idea of that happening. I'm just not with him on this wavelength here.
I feel totally vindicated on this. I've said for years, when everyone is calling Trump the N-word, they always call him the N-word, a nationalist.
Oh, yeah.
Always. They call him the N-word. And I said, I don't really think he's a nationalist. He loves the nation. He's a great patriot. He supports strong borders. But I said, I don't think he's really a nationalist. I think he's kind of an imperialist. He wants to acquire Greenland and invade Canada. I don't think that's not generally what yeoman farmers do.
No, that's a Teddy Roosevelt move.
Yes. I think his vision of America first is that America will take due care to prioritize her national interests, part of which is accepting the political reality that we're the global hegemon and we need to maintain some modicum of world order.
No, we don't maintain world order through spreading hegemony and empire throughout the world and floating the idea of conquest of Canada and Greenland and the Riviera and Gaza. That's preposterous. That's in total contradiction to the wisest words of the founding fathers like Jefferson, who said peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, and tangling alliances with none should be the American creed. With John Quincy Adams, it says America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. That was true at one point, no longer now. So it doesn't maintain order to float those ideas and try to fight proxy wars and regime change wars throughout the world.
And this goes back to the really ancient conception of the political order, which is that the purpose of empire is to just have peace and order. This is in the Aeneid, in Book 6 of the Aeneid. Aeneas goes down to his dad in the underworld, and the dad gives him this whole view of what's going to happen to Rome. And he says, look, different peoples are given different arts. The Greeks are good at making souvlaki. The Chinese are good at making bad soup, and the Romans,
awful soup.
Awful. I've never even tried. The pangolin is good, but I've never tried the bat. He says the Romans, their art is to govern. And it's not, governing is not fun. It's not the most glorious necessarily thing. In some ways it'd be more fun to be a writer, it'd be more fun to be a poet, it'd be more fun to go, but that's what the Romans are given, is to govern. And it's just a job in the world and someone's got to do it. And you just need to establish relative peace and protect the rights of nations and just keep on keeping on.
Do you think we're...
Yeah, I'm with him on that, but that goes contrary to the notion that we're going to talk about conquest in Greenland and Canada and continue this war in Ukraine and fund Israel endlessly. There was some semblance of truth in what he said there regarding the Romans and the Roman peace, Pax Romana. That's what Octavian, or later Augustus, essentially established. Augustus was not perfect. He was a murderer in some regards. But at some point, he realized that the empire needed to stop expanding. He made peace with the Parthians after Mark Antony attacked it, and Caesar was preparing to invade the Parthians. This is just an example, but that's what created more of a peaceful situation, not empire building and expanding the empire and continuing to spread hegemony throughout the region. Augustus allowed most regions, within the Roman Empire to retain much of their local customs, for instance. That's not something the American Empire is doing right now whatsoever.
Suited for that?
I think Trump is quite suited for it as an individual, as a national leader. Is America suited for it? It's not how we started. We weren't looking for it when the country began, but we got it.
I mean, I totally agree. Someone's got to be dad. I mean, that is absolutely just the nature of man, and there's no getting around it. In shirking it doesn't make it go away. So I completely agree with that. That's where I do agree with the neocons, I guess.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but in a different way, because the neocons, at their most extreme, would say we have an obligation because of the demands of history with a capital H to spread liberal democracy around the world.
That's just stupid.
It's crazy.
But the smart, I remember David Brooks, who was impressive. I know it's hard to believe, but at one point when I knew him 30 years ago, he was smart. And he would say, look, someone's got to take control because there has to be order at the center. And that's not stupid. Where I began to really hate the neocons, where my whole politics began to revolve around opposing them.
Amen. And I was once a neocon, just like Tucker Carlson was. We both have made penance with that. It's embarrassing to admit, but that is true. I reserve a special amount of disdain toward the neocons because of how low they've plunged the United States into a potential early grave, how they've done things to our detriment and never pay the price for it. So I'm glad to hear someone like Michael Knowles that, podcasts on Daily Wire say, it's madness to try to have this idea of spreading liberal democracy throughout the world. That was a Trotskyite idea, by the way, and the initial neocons were former Trotskyites. But instead of spreading a global, proletariat or a global proletariat revolution, they wanted to spread democracy throughout the world in this Wilsonian idealistic fashion. Never worked, never will. Project for a New American Century was a disaster.
As an ideology, not as individuals, but the idea is bad.
Some of the individuals, some of them.
John Podhoretz. But no, it's when I went to Iraq. And the main takeaway for me is we're not good at it.
Yeah.
We're just leaving aside the dumb spread democracy and all that nonsense, turn Baghdad into Belgium. It's just stupid. But what's not stupid is the idea that you can't have disorder because it metastasizes.
And even if the U.S. were good at it, I wouldn't favor it. It's not a beneficial policy to overthrow governments at all. America first means internal prioritization. That's something that's even lost among this administration, which waves the banner of America first and drain the swamp, but fills the swamp with swamp creatures and pertains to Israel first above all.
And getting there, my assessment, and has not changed in 25 years, is we're not suited for this at all because we don't have the self-confidence required to do it because our society at its core is really thin. There's nothing really there, actually, other than some distorted version of capitalism, which is kind of disgusting.
Do you think that was true, say, in the 50s and 60s, and it's changed? Or?
I think the fight, the Cold War, the battle against the Soviets gave a kind of clarity and purpose.
Yeah.
But even then, the U.S. Sided with the Viet Minh, actually, in 1954 at Dien Bien Phu against the French. There was never really a kind of consistent, that's
grand strategy.
Little known. Yeah, but not even grand strategy, but a consistent worldview or instinct. The English, for all their many faults, at the height of empire, the height of the Victorian period, they really believed they were superior. Now we deride that as racist. But you have to have that. You have to believe my way is the better way, or why are we doing this in the first place? To extract minerals? That's not, over time, people can't sustain that. You really have to have an evangelical spirit, and we don't have that.
Yeah, I actually think I agree with that. Not in terms of empire building, meaning I have the right idea and I believe that, so I have to export that throughout the rest of the world through warfare. That's not the right idea. That's a perversion of the right idea. The right idea is I believe that I have the correct truths necessary for a prosperous society, and I believe it. So what I'm going to do is build an example, build that idealistic city on a hill to show other people and onlookers and fence sitters that this is the way forward. This is the way to solve humanity's problems, not warfare and overthrowing regimes in the name of empire building schemes, and to line the pockets of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and adopt an Israel first mentality in the Middle East, wiping out regimes that Israel considers hostile for the benefit of no one other than the Israelis, if it's even a benefit to them, because they've turned world opinion against them for those kind of wars, for the Greater Israel Project trying to expand its borders into the West Bank and Gaza, and the occupation forthcoming, and the genocide in Gaza. So that's where we're at. I really like this conversation, and although I'm not a fan of the Daily Wire, I think that I would love to have a conversation with Michael Knowles. He's a guy that I think's really interesting to talk to. I did have some disagreements with him there, but this was a good conversation, and I largely agreed with Tucker. But let me know what you think down below. Is the United States and the Trump administration addicted to Israel? Is Congress still beholden to Israel? Was Knowles correct about Trump's mindset regarding foreign policy and the way forward? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Really appreciated this interview. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel. And in return, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.